Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, the Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico's unexpected visit to Moscow for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin has sparked intense debate across Europe. Their discussions on energy, the Ukraine conflict, and bilateral relations highlight Slovakia's divergent stance within the European Union. The trip has raised concerns about its potential impact on EU solidarity and energy security. Joining us today to analyze the implications of this meeting is Marta Prochwicz, Deputy Head of the Warsaw Office at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Ma'am, and welcome to TVP World.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
So, about this visit, what does Robert Fico's meeting with Vladimir Putin signal about Slovakia's foreign policy?
Well, I think Slovakia's foreign policy has definitely been at odds with the stance that most European Union countries have taken. They are not the only ones to have a pro-Russian foreign policy. That goes hand in hand with Hungarian foreign policy. And it shows also that Robert Fico is trying to show to his own internal domestic audience that he's able to forge contacts with countries other than the European Union, because obviously there are European Union member states, there are NATO member states, so he has those connections, but he wants to show that he's able to have a global policy. He also recently visited Brazil and China, and he's buying Blackhawks from the Americans. So he's really trying to prove to his people that he's able to be a global leader of global stature.
All right. And internationally, he seems to be trying to paint this as a pragmatic approach, mostly focusing on energy and gas transportation through Ukraine, buying gas from Russia. But a lot of things don't really add up when we think about this transit through Ukraine. It's perhaps Ukraine that has a say on whether or not these pipelines are being used. So do you think there's other message that he's trying to send internationally, or do you think that trying to convince international partner that this is just about gas is something, well, do you buy that excuse, basically?
I don't really buy that his visit is only about gas. From what we know, this was the main topic of the conversation, but there might be other things that we may not know about. Now, obviously, he's trying to make sure that Slovakia continues to receive gas from Russia. It has been profitable for Slovakia and beneficial to receive gas from Russia, even though the profits have been lower since the full-scale invasion. Now, whether he's able to secure this is an entirely different matter, because we're dealing with a situation in which Ukraine, basically that the contract was for a period of 5 years, and despite the full-scale invasion, Russia continued to send gas through Ukraine because of this 5-year contract, but it's about to be terminated now at the end. It's about to expire at the end of December. So the big question is whether Fico will be able to secure a renewed contract, but Russia is not the only side of the party that is able to decide on this, right? There's Ukraine that also has a say in it, and the Ukrainians, President Zelensky has said in Brussels that he definitely doesn't want to renew this contract. And EU leaders, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen definitely backs this position.
And of course, Slovakia is not the only country that's going to be affected by Ukraine not transporting Russian gas. We're also looking at Hungary, Moldova, as well as Austria, perhaps taking the brunt of the hit. Do you think there's any way the European countries can somehow alleviate some of the stress from the lack of gas transportation to hopefully make sure that they don't also follow Fico's footsteps?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is not the first time that we're actually dealing with a rupture of this gas distribution, of different hydrocarbons. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, that was probably the biggest shock when it started, and that led to a much larger disruption. This time, we were expecting it because we knew that this contract would expire. So these countries have had the time to think about about diversification, as all the other EU member states have adopted a lot of measures. So in particular for Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria, they have looked to countries such as Azerbaijan, further transits through Turkey, and their neighboring countries also going through Germany, where they can basically make sure that there's no sudden shortage of energy supplies to their countries. Countries have also turned to LNG, purchases from the United States, and also to Norway. So these steps are very, I'm not going to say easy to take, but there are several things that one can do. You don't have to go running to Putin straight away to try to continue this very uncertain supply, which is used as a weapon by the Kremlin.
Right, and speaking of weaponizing energy, we're also looking at a very critical timing when it comes to this particular visit. We are all kind of expecting some sort of negotiation between Russia and Ukraine coming up very soon. Do you think that this move by Robert Fico might actually damage the perception of European Union going into the peace negotiation and perhaps have some negative impact?
Yeah. I don't think that it can damage it. We've seen several of these steps. He's not the first one to go and see Putin. He's actually the third one. Nehammer, the Austrian chancellor, went to see him, and obviously Viktor Orban has seen him as well. So he's not the first one. And then another example is Chancellor Scholz speaking to Putin for the second time since the full-scale invasion on the phone. So I think that there have been so many signals of this disunity, and this, we know about it. And there are mechanisms and ways that we have found in the European Union to try to sideline these rogue actors in order to forge further unity and strengthen cooperation to strengthen Ukraine's hand. So while this is happening, I wouldn't put too much thought into it, because the actions that are being taken right now behind closed doors in European Union countries and coalitions of the willing, so it's on sort of two levels. It's not only happening on the EU level, it's happening on the coalition of willing European countries level, who are strongly thinking about ways that they can, first of all, finance Ukraine if the United States decides to withdraw its financial support and weapons, and how to make sure that Ukraine has the strongest position going into, and I wouldn't say negotiations, I would say potentially talks, because negotiations would mean that Russia would need to actually want to negotiate, and right now they have an upper hand, and I don't see that as a prospect.
You talked about sidelining some of the rogue actors within the European Union coming into this talks with Putin. And the former foreign minister from Slovakia also told us that during the meeting in Brussels, Fico's attempt at trying to have any sort of discussion when it comes to opening this pipeline has been denied by Zelensky as well as all the other partners within the European Union. Do you think that perhaps the sidelining and kind of negating these actors might actually drive them to the hands of Russia? Is there any way to kind of bridge that gap and kind of bring them back into the fold? Or do you think at this very critical timing is perhaps a little bit too far gone?
How to bring these countries back into the fold. I think that they're the ones doing this to themselves. So it's always really difficult to talk about this. And then when you look at other countries such as Georgia, for example, and the EU trying to make sure that those who are protesting against government actions in Georgia are still find, because obviously the Georgian government has sort of moved away from its EU process. So the EU is also trying to show that it supports those who are for the EU. The EU doesn't have too many well thought out mechanisms on how to do this. When Poland was experiencing a period in which it was also moving away from the European Union and denying the constitutionality of the EU, it was very hard hard to try to bring them back to the fold as well. It's very hard to see how that can be done.
Right. And what are some of the risks now when it comes to Slovakia deepening ties with Moscow, particularly as do you think that could create some sort of fracture within the Union?
I think it's already there. There's not much that can still rupture. Obviously, it's really important to maintain unity. It's one of the most important things that we have. But as I mentioned earlier, we also can forge coalitions of countries that are more like-minded. And the Eastern Front, the Eastern Flank countries, and the Nordics and the Baltics and Poland are definitely very like-minded partners that view the threat from Russia and the need to support Ukraine in the same way. So you might also argue that there's sort of a rupture between that part of Europe and Western Europe, which aligns with our views broadly speaking, but it's not always on the same page when it comes to enforcing things in the exact same manner. So this unity, we're aware of the unity, and this is unfortunately what Putin is exploiting.
Right. Now, last but not least, how do you think the European Union itself should respond to this visit in particular to kind of ensure the said unity that we were talking about and still upholding strategic priorities?
Well, Viktor Orban the Hungary had the presidency of the European Union just recently, right now, before Poland takes over the presidency. And during that time, he made one of these visits to visit Moscow. So it's in these moments, it's very hard for the European Union to show what its exact stance is when the presidency, the leader of the presidency, goes and sort of openly shows that there's divisions within the EU. And the way to enforce it is to make sure that we continue to support Ukraine and inventing or coming up with new creative solutions that would support Ukraine in the long term.
All right, and speaking of EU presidency, we do know that is going to be changing very soon as well. So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled and see how the rest of it develops. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight and breaking all of this down for us. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on TV.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.